Good evening and welcome to NUFC Matters this Friday night in a show sponsored by qtechshop.co.uk, who make pool tables and snooker tables in the heart of Wallsend. Thanks for your support, lads, and good evening to Ian Mearns and Steve Hasty. How are you, lads?
Very well, thanks.
Good to see you. Good to see you. And Neil will be joining us. Those of you who follow him on Twitter will know he's had issues with his phone, so he's on and off. I'm sure we'll have more success at getting him on than we did with Joe Allen a couple of days ago. But as always, plenty to talk about on the Three Amigos show. I'm sure we'll be touching on the takeover. A lot of people already sending messages in asking if we can ask what's going on. Big thanks to George Mitchell, Neil's dad, for becoming a member, and to Kevin Chilvers, thanks for joining up. You can subscribe to the channel, or you can click join, make a small donation, which helps us keep the costs to a minimum for the show. But big thanks for you, as always, for coming on, lads. Steve, let's start talking about football before we go to takeover. Hey. 1 week in, 2 games, 2 wins, 2 clean sheets. It's a positive start, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we couldn't have asked for more, could we? You know, when you look at it that way. I mean, Saturday's performance, Saturday night, the result was I think probably took a lot of people by surprise. 2-0 away from home, can't complain with that one. Completely changed team, of course, on Tuesday night. Few tired legs, a few legs who looked as though that they weren't ready for a full game, if you know what I mean, in terms of being in the first team. And we got the result that we needed. We're into the next round of the Carabao Cup. Yes, a cup run, Ian.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's good.
Well, I think the one thing that I was a little surprised at was the team selection. And I know that we got through, but we scraped it, really. I mean, frankly, we did scrape it. I mean, I think apart from the goalkeeper, I thought he played well, Gillespie. But I thought that, the amount of possession that we allowed Blackburn to have was a little bit optimistic, shall we say. I mean, a better side in terms of the last third would have punished us more than they did. But we're through when we're in the draw, and we've got. Is it Morecambe or Watford or somebody away, and
Morecambe so in the next game, and then potentially we could get Watford.
Watford,
in the next round.
So that's interesting. I think the West Ham game though, 3 points away from home. I thought we played particularly well. I thought, honestly, there were plaudits for a number of players. I would like to highlight also the ones that were obvious. Manquillo and Fernandez, I thought both had solid games. I think Manquillo produced a lot down the right-hand side, and I thought Fernandez was solid in the middle of the back, so I thought that was very good. And I think Carl Darlow has got the woodwork to thank a lot for as well, So, the woodwork was a good goalkeeper for us from that perspective. But 3 points, and I thought the next round of a cup. But I think I honestly believe we should take the League Cup seriously, because the other clubs, the other likely winners of in the top half of the Premier League, there's going to be fixture congestion, and if we put more resource into that we've got a very good chance of getting to a cup final if we take it seriously.
Yeah, we do. You touched on the goalkeepers, both of you. Steve, I'll come to you first. Darlow, first game in the Premier League. Gillespie in the cup game. I was impressed by both. They both did, they both had enough involvement. I would like to see Gillespie in the Premier League, but, I'm a lot more confident in the two keepers after seeing them both perform as well in each game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing with goalkeepers, though, once you've got the shirt, you tend to hang on to it, don't you? And certainly in the Premier League, it's very rare, going back. I think the last manager I can recall who chopped and changed goalkeepers was probably Keegan, when he would have Shaka Hislop in for a couple of games, and then Pav would be in for a couple of games. Then it was Shaka again. And whether it does you any good defensively, I'm never too sure. But, Darlow, I on Saturday night when we did the show, I said that I thought Darlow was my man of the match, simply because of the pressure that he had been under coming into the game, not playing a Premier League game up virtually all the last season. he was under pressure because of the goals that had been leaked in the pre-season friendlies, and there was a lot of chatter on social media, etc., about his performance. So I felt as though the performance he put in, and I know Ian's saying about the woodwork, and yes, that's unusual for us to have the woodwork helping us out. It's usually going the other way around. But I thought they had a great game. Gillespie, I watched the game as best I could and listened to the game as well on the show that you ran, Steve. And so it was difficult to sort of really get a flavour of how the lad had done. But the very fact that, again, another goalkeeper keeping a clean sheet, and obviously, worked well with the back four that he had in front of him. So all in all, things look good in the goalkeeper's position. We've got Dubravka who can come back. We've got Darlow there, probably will remain as a number 2, but Gillespie putting pressure on him, and the fact that the two of them, if for example there was an injury on Sunday to Darlow, we wouldn't be sitting there going, "Oh, we've got a third choice goalkeeper coming in." We've got what looks like a second choice playing third fiddle.
I thought Gillespie looked more confident in terms of managing crosses, by the way.
Right.
Yeah.
I would say you were right. Yeah, he did come out and collect. What I like about Gillespie is he's a Geordie lad. The back page tweeted, that he used to go on the back page coaches, and he used to go home and away. So he's he knows what it's all about. I think that's something which is positive. But yeah, look, the boy can play. I think Steve Bennett believes that Woodman is the long-term future. Rich Story thought Gillespie was solid, great double stop, and caught everything. Go on if you got something.
Just one last thing though. But in our first game, weren't actually West Ham awful?
Yeah.
Oh, well, yeah.
And don't we enjoy saying that as well, Ian?
That's got to be the context as well. I mean, they were awful.
Yes. But it's good to say that West Ham were awful. It's a great phrase to use, isn't it? We get a buzz out of that.
Yeah. Oh, we do. Mitch, good evening. Hope you're well, mate. I know you've had an absolute Tony Blair with your phone.
I've had a stinker of a week. I've had one of them weeks, if I fell in a barrel of boobs, I'd come out with my thumb in my mouth. I've had one of them weeks.
Yeah, mate. Right, okay. So look, we're in a position. You're in a position where you've managed to get it working, so that's good news. What did you make of Newcastle's first 2 games, mate?
West Ham would look easy, look comfortable.
Yeah.
I mean, what Ian says is right. West Ham were awful, and I can see where their fans are kicking off. I was speaking to a couple of the West Ham lads who get into Nelson's down in Teagob, and it doesn't sound like a very happy club at all. It has a decided feel about the way we sometimes were in the 80s and 90s. It has that kind of absolute simmering unrest underneath the surface. So good time to play them. So, and we played quite well. It looked steady. It's not often you can say we look comfortable, but we genuinely did. I like the pairing of Fraser, Wilson and Carroll, sorry. I think, look, you keep Andy Carroll fit, and this is the eternal question, isn't it? How do you manage him? How do you wrap him up with cotton wool? Can he get 70 minutes a week out of him minimum? Because as a pair, and they looked fabulous, really did. The new midfielder Hendrick was solid without being spectacular until he put that cracking finish into the back of the net. I mean, dear me, very little bat lifting these bases through it. And it's nice to see a player prepared to have a pop. Too long have we had too many players who wanted to walk the ball in the back of the net, and sometimes you just scream and just stick your leather through it to have a go. And he really did have a go. So no, really, really, really good start. League Cup, loads of changes. Again, picking up on what you were saying, Gillespie looked really good in goal, I thought. And I think that's great. Good run out for Fraser and a goal to boot. You can only, in cup competitions, all you've got to do is beat what's in front of you and get through to the next round. So I'll never over-analyse a cup competition like that, particularly when you're making wholesale changes to the team. I don't think you can genuinely whinge too much, provided you progress to the next round. And if you look at how the draw's fallen for the next 2 rounds have been kind in terms of the draw for once. And blink and we could be in the quarterfinals, and that's nuts. That's
Aye,
absolutely nuts.
Before the end of October. It's because they're fast tracking the cup competition.
Absolutely. But this is the way they've always done it in Germany. In Germany, they've always got the League Cup competition out the way before Christmas.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea.
And I think it's a great idea, and it's something that should last. If it's a competition that teams don't want to put a particularly high value on, let's just fast track it, get it out of the way, and then it's done. And I know the winners going to this confusing new third tier European competition that they're just concocting up again, which is for my mind all about starting the stage towards some sort of European Super League, and getting fans that used to the idea of European leagues. But that's maybe an argument for another day. But to be fair, like I say, blink and we could be well on our way, and isn't that quite exciting? And that's all we've got to do with the next 2 rounds. That's all we've got to focus on, is beat what's in front of you and progress. Beat what's in front of you and progress. That's it. I don't care if we're playing pretty football, nasty football, we're scraping past the Division 3 team by 1-0. Don't care, because the record book will just show in that round Newcastle United progressed. You then, though, have to be on your mettle for once you do start meeting bigger teams later in the competition, and be prepared to do again what some of those do. They stop then rotating the squad. They start playing their better teams, and that's where in team selection Bruce has got to be ruthless and not sentimental.
Yeah, I agree. Dave Avery has made a good point. Something we're going to do anyway, Dave, but thanks for mentioning. Al Walid, who obviously does our worldwide show on a Sunday, has lost his uncle today. So our thoughts from NUFC matters to Al Walid and to his family. Sorry to hear that news, mate. Very sad. Yeah, we'll dedicate the show to him.
Yeah, I was due to be joining him after this tonight, and I think we're going to do it next week now.
Okay, mate. Okay. Well, thoughts with Al Walid. Hope him and his family are okay. Let's. Obviously, I hate doing this because it tends to turn the show into well, exactly. You know exactly who I'm going to mention. Joe Linton. Ian. Joe Linton.
Is this where we play Bring in the Clowns?
Well, now look, I've said I'm going to give him 10 games. He's had 2 games, and I'm not going to be sticking the knife. I'm not sticking the knife in the kid's back. He's a Newcastle player. He's number 9, and he's got 10 games from me. So, Ian, your views on Joe Linton and his commitment to the cause, his efforts, and his all-round play on the cup game.
Well, I'm afraid to say he was back into his couldn't trap a bag of cement mode, wasn't he? You know, I mean, the ball was kind of bouncing off him, and that's really quite worrying. I'm honestly convinced there's a footballer in there somewhere, but but there's not a 40 million quid footballer in there somewhere. You know, there might be a 10 million pound footballer in there somewhere, who might be, a reasonable player on left side of midfield or whatever. I'm not, but at the minute, I'm afraid to say, as much as I want to give the lad a chance, I'm just not seeing it. Like, I thought he was awful in the night, which is sad.
Okay, Steve.
You know what? I listened to Malcolm on Wednesday night on your show, and I thought Malcolm summed it up absolutely perfectly. We know the lad's not a number 9. We know he's not a centre forward. We know he can't lead the line. And as Malcolm said, the lad should be honest enough and strong enough with £40 million on his head to go to the manager and say, look, I am a footballer. I can play football, but I'm not a footballer in the position that you're playing me. Play me in this role. This is the role that I have spent the last 5 years of my career playing. And that position, that's the position that he was seen to be playing by the scouts, was on the left wing. Now, that gives him a bit of a problem because we've got players, as Malcolm said, already in that position. So that's when the lad suddenly starts having to bust a gut, and he has to fight for his place, and he has to show his manager what he can do with the pressure that comes from trying to dislodge a teammate. And with that comes the workload that he has to put in. And as Malcolm said, and I think other people have commented on it, the likes of Alan Shearer, and I think Warren Barton mentioned it last night, Steve. You know, if Alan had a poor game, the first thing Alan would do on a Monday after training would be out there trying to sort out the issue that he had, the miss that he committed during that game, to make sure that the next time the opportunity arose, he reacted in the right way. You know, put the ball where he wanted it to be. Reacted, worked with his teammates to do that in training, and worked solidly outside, you know, for a good hour after everybody's gone in, with the coaches telling, you know, explaining to him where they think he's going wrong, and him showing them how he can put it right. Now that is what we need from him. And will he get a chance as long as Andy Carroll stays fit? Probably not. Does he deserve to have a chance if Andy Carroll's fit? Probably not. But the lad has to show that he's ready when the call comes, when he needs to get into that first team. And the only way he can do it is graft for himself. And if he's of the mindset that all he has to do is that hour and a half in the morning at training, have his lunch and go home, then we're never going to see a different Joe Linton.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Neil, your take?
Do you know what it is? I watch him. And like Ian, you know, I've said this for almost all along. I still do think there's a footballer in there somewhere to work with. But when you see him playing up front, and you compare him, the positions he takes up, and the things he does in around the box, he's not a natural number 9. And in the formation we play, that doesn't work. It can't work. And with the people he has around him, that doesn't work, and it can't work. So you've got two choices. You either find the position that he's comfortable in, like Steve says, or, like Malcolm says, you need somebody to be working with him one-on-one to change his game, and he has to be prepared to learn and change his game. And that's the bit that I don't know. I don't know what his character's like. I don't know what he's like off the pitch, you know. I have a suspicion, but that's just my cynical nature of many young footballers that don't think too many of them are prepared to learn and change. You look at something like what Shearer did after he had that ankle injury, and he changed his game, changed how he played, and he worked hard to not just get fit, but to adapt to the fact he'd lost that bit of acceleration and that little bit of pace. And he played for another few years after and was just as effective, just as much of a beast, and worried just as many defenders, but he worked hard to change his game. If Joe Linton's prepared to put the work in, what we need to be doing is finding someone, some sort of striking coach, who can take it to one side and say, right, okay, when you're making that move and that run there, you're actually taking yourself out of the game. You know, I read an interview with, of all people, Kevin Phillips, talking about how sometimes he got some of his best goals because he knew when not to move. He knew when to stand still and let the defenders move around him. And I don't think Joe Linton's got any of that instinct in him at all. And I think that's the problem. And that's why he looks hopelessly out of depth. And he's trying to do things he's not equipped to do. And he's being asked to do things that he's not equipped to do, if that makes sense.
He's also being bossed, isn't he? Completely and utterly bossed by central defenders and fullbacks and even midfielders. He gets bossed. He's a big lad. He should be using his size and his strength and his upper body strength. But he's bossed. He's knocked off the ball by midgets at times, you know?
We had that problem with Shola sometimes.
Yeah.
Shola sometimes just didn't. You think, good God, lad, you're 6 foot odd. You should be flattening people. And he'd be hassled off the ball.
My missus doesn't like football, Mitch, and she came to a game. The one game she came to, I got an invite to somebody's executive box, so I took her to the game. Shola was playing, and the only time Dawn came out of the executive box and watched about 10 minutes of the game, she looked and she went, "Why does that player keep falling down?" And it was Shola.
It was Shola.
She knows nothing about football, and even she could see that Shola spends more time on his backside. But he did score plenty goals against the Mackhams.
The lads around me in the Gallagher end used to call him Bambi on ice.
But you're right, he's very similar to Shola Ramiobi, Mitch.
It's that frustration that you can see there's something going on. And like Shola, how many How many managers used to say best player on the training pitch? You can do this and you can do that and you can finish this and you can finish that. And so many of them used to say that. And you could see on occasion little flashes. That game when him and Loa took Leverkusen apart when they were a pair of kids, you know? He could do stuff. And then the next minute, he'd be on his backside, flapping his arms in the air because somebody 3'6" had just knocked him over. And you'd be like, can somebody teach this man how to use his size? And Joe Linton needs a little bit of that. Because he's not a small bloke.
I'm just wondering whether Joe Linton, we need to just collectively stop referring to him as a striker, you know, and you know, just try and find a different role for him. You know, I really don't know what it is. Maybe it would be like a number 10 sort of role, you know, but, you know, I'm not sure.
Ian, I think in a different system, if you had a manager who played with one of these, to use a modern term, a false nine, that's the kind of role he might play as a central striker in a system where he's not an advanced central striker in the mode that we want a number 9, but he was a central striker that would hold up play and drop off and let other people join in that false 9 kind of role.
Yeah,
and I suspect that's the kind of role he's probably played in the past in Brazil. It depends on what the system is. And so here we are. I mean, I think, didn't I say this last year? The square pegs and round holes, and he's a bloody octagon, and we've got no idea what to do with him.
Yeah,
and at times, he has no idea either.
Mad Mag Mark says NUFC employed a striking coach for Mitrovic when he struggles in front of goal. Why won't they do the same for Joe Linton? I do believe that Mitrovic actually employed his own striking coach. I think there was a few issues. I think that's what he did. He had a couple of coaches around him that he employed himself, which you know, fair play. But I think it was getting in the way of what Rafa actually wanted him to do. I've got a question, a couple of questions coming in. Let's. I know everybody wants to talk about the takeover. I do try to avoid it because there isn't a great deal to talk about. Let's get it out the way. Let's get the elephant out the room. First of all, Ian, I'll come to you. Barry Hogan says, Ian, is there any update on the petition that was presented in Parliament, or is that as far as it goes now? Are they aware of it?
Well, you know, there's been a number of things which have happened, but which we haven't yet had governmental responses on. And, you know, I suppose from the government's perspective, they can say they're a bit busy at the moment and it's not top of their priorities. But, you know, I've certainly sent off additional letters to ministers asking for a response to letters that I've sent them. And I think we should also be asking for a response to the petition. And also, by the way, you know, I still haven't had anything back from Richard Masters, you know, so it's interesting.
No surprise.
And by the way, Richard Masters is perfectly entitled to ignore me as an individual MP, but I was writing on behalf of a group of MPs who form the all-party group for football supporters.
Yeah, okay, mate. Thanks for the update on that. Mitch, I'm going to come to you about this question first. John O and a couple of other people have asked the same question. What are your thoughts on Blackstone Chambers removing the Ashley NUFC legal challenge article? Obviously, a lot of furore on Twitter when this went up. Shared beyond belief. People copying and pasting and sending it round. Big guns are out. You know, we covered it on last week's show. It's now been removed. Is that likely because they just don't want the attention that the kind of Twitter mania brings to NUFC world, and they don't want that associated with that company?
That's how I would view that, mate. My immediate reaction when I'd heard it being taken down is that somebody in their social media team was absolutely sick and tired of dealing with comments and being bombarded with retweets and tweets and comments. Particularly in the legal world, where you've got people openly discussing a case before it's gone anywhere near any court, when they're in the process of putting everything together, and they can just do without the hassle. They don't need it, and so for me, that's the simplest answer, and often the simplest answer is the most logical one. I mean, you can make out of it what you will, in the way we've been over the last few years in particular in reaction to social media, things like that, is the knee-jerk is, it means that he's pulled it, they've refused it, they've rejected it, they're not going to take the case. And you can read it 10 million different ways, but the simplest answer is somebody at Blackstone Chambers is probably sick of being retweeted and having Geordies cheering them on Twitter instead of just say, "Did you know what? Let's just pull this down." And that to me seems like the proper reaction of a legal firm to me.
Yeah,
Steve, would you agree on that?
Yeah. I mean, Mike, when I saw the message come up, the two things ran through my mind. Either it was unprofessional from the company themselves to actually do that, to actually say that they were acting on behalf of somebody, or they were being deliberately provocative on behalf of Mike Ashley, because Ashley wanted that message out there to tell people that he was gunning, he had gone for the big guns, and he had parked his tanks very much on the Premier League's lawn. So those were the two things that went through my mind. Thinking about it, I thought, you know what? Is it a good thing or a bad thing? How will the Premier League react to it? How are the fans going to be reacting to this? Because everything that we know in public domain has been rumor and innuendo and scratching of heads and scratching of backsides and God knows what else, and trying to figure out what's happening. So to suddenly have something for us to hang our hat on, as though that we had we had Superman, Batman, every other Marvel character going that was going to now be fighting our corner for us and winning this. And then it came off. Then it disappeared. It was gone. Just like that. And when it went, I thought it was quite a bit of a relief. And I just thought, you know what? As Neil said, social media, they've got sick because they knew they were going to get hammered. We know. Do you remember when Keith Bishop Associates were getting hammered, for example, Steve? And they had to take their social media down. Do you remember when Sports Direct were getting hammered and their social media had to come down? And so it went on. Do you remember when Luke Edwards disappeared up his own backside for a fortnight because he was getting hammered on social media and was gone? And so I mean, that's what it's like. We home in on people. We home in on something because we're desperate. We're desperate for knowledge. We're desperate for information. We're desperate for success. We want, we get slagged off and we get told we're desperate for success, and we're deluded. But the only thing that we're desperate for is this takeover to happen. After that, it's back to just enjoying Newcastle United again. We've had 13 years of this. Rage inside of us, with this man who has just driven us for 12 of those 13 years up the wall, So it's a relief in a way that it's come down. It's one less thing for us to worry about, although I'm sure people are now worried because it's gone.
I'm looking forward to Batman and Superman in Marvel Comics, mind.
Well, you know what I mean. Everyone's a superhero to me. Even you're like a hero. You're the Batman of letter writing.
So somebody,
I've got my utility belt.
Somebody was asking the question: Would Alan Shearer coming in and speaking to Joe Linton make it? I know always end up back on the subject. Would that help him? Do you think Supermax even said he would go in and he'd be happily go and do it free of charge? You'd go and have a chat with him and sit him down, and Malcolm tells that fantastic story. The first day he turned up at St James's, he was approached by Jackie Milburn, took him under his wing, took him on a drive around the northeast. Malcolm always remembers that story. You know what I mean? So if Alan Shearer actually went up to the stadium and went to see Joe Linton, Ian, do you think it would make any difference?
Would they let him in?
Well, if they had to, if it was going to benefit the club. Brucey's good pals with Alan.
Well, I think it was Bill on the chat that, or somebody on the chat was saying, look, let's stop talking with Joe Linton, because there's nothing there. Look, the guy is a 40 million quid asset. Let's try and retrieve whatever we can from Joe Linton, and as I say, if it means him doing a different role within a side, but at the minute we've got to find some way somehow of actually getting him to perform on a pitch, and whether it's as a number 9 or I don't know, but as long as it's in a black and white shirt, if we can find a way of doing that, I would try anything, you know, and I think it'd be brilliant, you know, if Alan Shearer would agree to taking on that sort of role. I mean, there are loads and loads of former players that's played for Newcastle United that I would love to see to come in to be like mentors to the current squad in terms of attitude, in terms of skill sets, in terms of what to expect from the fans. You know that sort of mentoring would be really, really useful. Because I tell you what it is, you know, there'll be players who are coming into this club now, you know, the new signings in particular, they're going to have a very strange attitude towards what the club's about when there's an empty stadium there. And you know what it is, when the stadium gets full again, it might become a shock to them. So I think we've got to, you know, be trying all sorts of different things, psychological attitudes, but I mean, I think, look, getting Shearer in to work with him, or somebody to work with him, just to try and get whatever we can out of him. Because at the minute, without that, what we've got is 40 million quid down the drain. And Newcastle United, whether it's under Ashley or anybody else's ownership, we just cannot afford that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Steve, do you see Alan Shearer making a difference to Joe Linton? Would you like to see that? I mean, somebody's, James Brown, I think it was, essentially said the problem with the club is they don't seem interested in the help the former players are willing to do to help the club out.
That's an interesting statement, isn't it? We've got Steve Harper there as goalkeeping coach, or at the under-23s. We've had Beardsley in the past.
Ramage there now, Peter Ramage.
Peter Ramage there now, yes. We know of other players who are desperate to help out at Newcastle United, who would probably walk over hot coals. Nobby Solano being one, who would love to be there at Newcastle United in some way, shape or form. Players of great stature, world stature, people like Nobby, for example. Alan would be fantastic. You couldn't get a better mentor, could you, than Alan Shearer, other than perhaps Malcolm himself, because Malcolm was a great centre forward, an old style centre forward, slightly different to Malcolm in certain to Alan in certain respects, but both of them knew how to put the ball in the back of the net, and that's the one thing that Joe Linton doesn't seem to be able to do. Joe Allen would do a canny job, you know. He would also be able to take him out on town and have a drink with him, couldn't he? You know, so
he'd breaking all kinds of lockdown rules. He'd never say that. He'd not be there for 3 o'clock on a Saturday. That's for sure.
That's true. But you know what I mean? Because somebody who's played in front of a big crowd at St James's Park, someone as Ian said would have can instill that confidence or instill that message of what it's like to be playing, especially at the moment during lockdown. But to have what is basically the top goal scorer of all time at Newcastle United to be your mentor, you'd think Joe Linton would be, walking over hot coals to Alan's house, to ask him, would he help him? Alan's got a big enough garden, apparently. I mean, they could be doing it in there,
Bit like
socially distant. Socially distant.
Exactly, yeah.
Mitch,
Joe Linton could socially distance, couldn't he? Because he's been socially distancing from the penalty spot and the blooming goal for God knows how long now. He's invented social distancing on the football pitch, from what I can see.
Definitely. Mitch, what's your take on it? Do you think anybody, could anybody help him?
I tell you what's interesting. Somebody's just put a comment up on the screen about Andy Carroll. Mm-hmm. And this, it's noticeable in that opening game, the way when the goals went in and people wanted to celebrate, who was the first person everybody seemed to look for?
Andy Carroll.
And so, yeah, maybe Andy Carroll could step up, as a peer, as somebody alongside him, with, on the training pitch with him day in, day out. Say, right, mate, let's have half an hour after the training session. Mm-hmm. And it would be interesting to see. Again, we need to know, is this something that Joe Linton is willing to do? Because if he is, we need to find a way to make it work for him. And if Carroll was prepared to step up and do that, because he seems to be, even if you go to that little video that he did with them all eating after they'd signed Wilson and Fraser and Richie that he stuck up on Instagram again, who's sort of like the person in the squad that seems to be doing all the morale lifting and the bonding and bringing the team together, and that was obvious on the pitch against West Ham. Very obvious on the pitch against West Ham.
Tell you what,
So,
tell you what though, Mitch, Andy Carroll might benefit from it as well.
yes.
Because he hasn't put the ball in the back of the net for over a year.
But some people grow into roles like that, and they grow as an individual, and they get more out of them. And so, in doing something like that as well, for me, it would take away a little bit of the concern about his fitness, because if he's around him all day, every day on the training pitch and helping out in that way, if Andy Carroll has a couple of games out, it's less of a concern because he's still that influence in the dressing room. He's still that influence for the entire squad.
I've got to be honest, people who watch this channel are on fire tonight. I'm sorry, I keep laughing at it. Can we not use Joe Linton's for body parts when Andy gets injured? Joe Linton couldn't hit a cow's arse with a banjo. I've told you I'm defending him for the next 8 games, so don't be bringing me into these arguments.
He's not going to score past you.
Steve, you're doing a great job.
Final thing on Joe Linton, just a one-word answer. Would Richard Anderson's asked, would any of you put him in your starting 11? Ian?
I'm afraid not at the minute.
Steve?
No.
Neil?
Yeah, as it stands, no.
Okay, and I'm not answering. I'm just hosting the show, so that's that keeps me right for the next 8 games anyway. Put him out on loan, says Martin Sutton. We'll leave it at that. Trolls asked a question about the BN Sports court case. Ian, I'm not sure whether you managed to see any of that, because I know it's been a busy week in Westminster with everything that's going on with various lockdowns in the area. But it has been interesting to see. You know, we've all had this feeling about the takeover not going through because of the Qatari influence and BN Sports, and the court case has been fascinating. There's obviously a lot being put out there, a lot of evidence being put out there, and obviously there's 2 sides to every story. But what's coming out, you know, I think a lot of people who are watching it feel it could be a positive. You know, it could be a positive for the Newcastle United takeover, just another little thing which goes towards us eventually getting what we want.
Yeah, well, who knows, you know, and I think people will watch this develop with interest. It might, you know, innocent or proven guilty is the normal rule that we go by. But frankly, if this goes quite wrong from the BN Sports perspective, and the individuals at the top of that coming out of it rather badly, it makes the stance that people like Richard Masters have taken look a bit silly.
Yeah, it does, Steve. I mean, it has been an interesting case to watch. I've dipped in and out of it, but yeah, quite quite revealing, some of the stuff that's coming out of that.
Yeah, what's also revealing is the distance that they all seem to be putting between themselves. For example, the head of BN Sports, who was being looked at today, the distance that he tried to put himself from some of the allegations that were made. And obviously, Valk has turned into some kind of whistleblower because everything's been loaded onto him, everything's been pressed onto him, and now we're hearing, you know, in the defence of the BN chairman, well, I didn't know about that. That's nothing to do with me. We've heard other people in BN Sports who said it wasn't their part of their remit to be looking at TV deals. Their role was another side of it. We've got the guys from FIFA saying exactly the same. So it's very much like they're all playing dodgeball at the minute. And I think that in terms of knowing how situations like this arise and how situations tend to play out. And as Ian said, you know, you're innocent or proven guilty, but you put enough distance between yourself and an allegation that it becomes very, very difficult to actually pin that allegation, not just to you, but actually nail it and hammer you to the floor with it and find you guilty. So there might be a lot of supposition made. There might be a lot of suggestions about corruption. There might be lots of examples where it may appear that it's corrupt, but has he put enough distance between himself and the final decision maker or the decision itself, whether it's over a period of time or whether it's over a certain amount of money, or whether it's over a particular deal? I engaged in a lot of conversation, a Twitter conversation with Ben Jacobs today on Twitter, who was very open and very honest. He came back to a comment that I made. He responded, and he put me right on one or two things that I'd said. I then was able to enter into a dialogue with him, and he responded accordingly and explained some of the situations he knows, because he explained that he's been acting as an advisor, if you like, in the whole media maelstrom that occurs with broadcasting rights. So he's not just a journalist; he's also been in an advisory role. And even listening to him and his explanation, you see the distance that suddenly seems to have opened up, because there were companies mentioned today by him that actually have the production, do all the production activity for the Premier League, and then they've been brought on, so the Premier League sells the rights to BN Sports, but then BN Sports then buy the production off another company, and so straight away the lines stretch, the distance becomes apart, and that allows you to point the finger at X, Y, and Z, and it does give a get out for BN and for their executives to a certain degree. How much of a degree only the judge will be able to come back with a decision on, but it's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, to think that, for example, you could make a decision in 2014 on how the rights to the World Cup in 2026 and 2030 will be handed to or given or bought by BN Sports for a figure in 2014 for a product in 2026 that now has more teams going to be playing in it than was originally thought, more countries, that is. So it's gone from a 32 to a 40-odd team competition or country competition. So it's a much bigger thing, and yet they've got the rights for the whole of the World Cup, the distribution, etc. And you're thinking, wow, how can you make a decision, and how can you put a price on something so far in advance? And then somebody gets a villa out of it.
What?
Steve,
What Aston Villa? Aston Villa.
Steve Bennett says, not been a great deal of mainstream media coverage on the BN court case. He's right, isn't he, Mitch?
He's absolutely right. But again, let's all come back to something that we made during comments made about how BN have acted and responded with regards to the takeover. It's BN have been rallying broadcast partners around, and they've been doing it for months. Those same broadcast partners are now not necessarily reporting this court case exactly the same way that, for example, we're getting it here in the Middle East. There's 2 or 3 regional news websites or minute by minute updates on it. It's hot news out here. And yes, there's geopolitical undertones. Of course, there's geopolitical undertones to it all, because that's the nature of the beast out here. But it's absolutely crystal clear, like Steve says. The media in the UK are absolutely not reporting on this to the same level of vitriol that was done in regards to piracy when it was going the other way.
Yeah.
As Steve says as well, Valka's trying his very best to throw everybody under the bus. He's gone full on. Okay, I'll cop for this, but if I'm going down, I'm taking everybody with us. And the problem in a case like this is witnesses like that suddenly become hostile and dangerous, and it's not always a good thing. And so it's how they view his witness testimony, and is it hostile or is it not? Is he going out of his way to push everybody he can under the bus? And how does that relate to the bid process? As Steve rightly says, though, the bidding process in 2014 for 2 World Cups ahead is quite odd. And it's quite odd. How do you do the math? You don't even know what the competition format's going to be like by then. And it's changed not just once, but twice in the intervening time. And so There's a lot of sort of, you look at the process and then have to say, if you tie it in with other things that have gone on within FIFA in the last few years and other things that have happened with officials being brought down through allegations of corruption and backhander dealing, etc., it's not a good look at all. No. At all. And that's the thing, and that's the difficulty with judging about which way everything's going to go. And actually, when you break down the evidence that's coming out, as Steve says, some of it's been quite fascinating. And it's also not a good look, though, when you've got an individual like the head of BN who was trying to distance himself so far, where sometimes the only answer is, "Oh, I didn't know anything about that." Well, I didn't know is not an excuse in law.
No. No, it's not. I think Steve as well. I mean, I think, you know, I hope they've got a good witness protection program out there, because when somebody turns state's evidence in the United States, you know, they hide them away, because usually there's an awful lot of skeletons to come out of the closet when somebody's turned state's evidence like that. And I do hope that they've got the individual well protected if that's what they're going to do. Like,
we've all seen that scene in Godfather 2, haven't we? When it gets to the court case, and then all of a sudden Michael Corleone wheels in the brother in the background who can't speak a word of English, and at which point the guy just completely clams up and says,
"No, I was never there. I don't know him. Never met him. You know."
I think that we all know the history of FIFA. We all know what FIFA are like. I mean, I read a book many years ago that I've just dug out again and started reading again, which was about the men who stole football, or the man who stole football, and it takes you right the way back to Havelange and the way that he controlled FIFA. You know, to the point where literally everything, and Plata learned everything he knew from him. And there was a funny scene a few years ago when Plata got taken to court, and Plata lost his position in FIFA, and then had the audacity, because of the police raids that had happened on his house, because of that, they removed lots and lots of items, and it was known that FIFA used to just pay people off. You know, you went to a meeting with FIFA and the first thing that you were handed was a Rolex, for example. And what was interesting was when Plata decided that he's lost his position, they couldn't actually nail him with anything. He got banned for like 16 years from football or something ridiculous. And then had the audacity to try and take the authorities to court to get his watches back. The watches that he had been handed, or that he had arranged for to have himself, because everybody else was getting watches. Well, of course, he was getting a watch every meeting, you know, and he had dozens and dozens of these Rolexes, and he wanted them back, you know. So he took them to court for to get them, the authorities, you know. That's the sort of corruption. That's the lower end, if you like, if you want to call it the lower end of corruption. That's the goodie bag, you know. That's the Gucci goodie bag with everything in, you know. You go to an expo, for example, you get a goodie bag with a pen and a ruler and a rubber, and that's about it, you know. You go to a FIFA meeting, you get a Rolex, you get the Gucci bag, you get everything that goes with it, you know. And that's how they nurtured it, wasn't it, over the years? And the master of it was Havelange, who turned it into a fiefdom of his own and held control of it from about he took control of it in, I think, 1970, when he snapped it out of the hands of what was his name? He was the Englishman
Stanley
who
Rose.
Sorry?
Stanley Rose. Was it Stanley Rose?
No. It was a British guy and the Englishman, and he took control when he retired and carried on all the way to the France World Cup. And 98, and of course that was it. You know, that's when it was a case of, well, who's going to take over from me? And Plata was seen as the next man, and then it was Platini seen as the man after that, just carrying on the fiefdom all the way through. You know, and
but that sense of entitlement about you know, basically the free gift thing, you know, and it was to such an extent that they were disappointed if they weren't getting gifts worth thousands of pounds on each occasion, like, you know.
And I think Jack Walker and people like that in Trinidad, and we all know that, you know, they managed to break down the American side of it, you know, and the CONCACAF. And again, that was the corruption that went on there. And we've seen it in the IAAF with the athletics, you know, that once these guys get into power, the first thing they do is dip their fingers in, you know, and take whatever they can. It's shocking, and it's our money. It's football's money, you know, and it's. Will we ever get to the bottom of it? Will this court case come out in the way that we expect? You know, my suspicion is that it won't, that we'll end up back in exactly the same position as we are now, where, you know, they haven't been able to nail this particular one down. And Valka, because he's already admitted it, he'll end up falling on his sword, you know.
Well, there's somebody said in the chat box there, great word, thiefdom. Well, my word for it's kleptocracy.
Yes.
Got 10 minutes. I know we've got about 6 or 7 minutes before Ian's got to go, and I just wanted to touch on the whole crowds thing with Ian. Me and him were talking about it off air before we came on tonight. And Darren Cowan's asked, with restrictions in the northeast now, what is everyone's view on Borough having 1,000 fans in the stadium against Bournemouth this weekend? And we were talking about this, Ian, weren't we? I mean, I just can't, and I know you agree, I can't see us going back to full stadiums at all this season. I just think with what's happening with COVID, Northeast again, and like some kind of lockdown, subsequent things going to be rolled out in other areas, Lancashire next, you know, Dublin's been talked about, and I just can't see it. Can you, the crowds going back to football full time?
I'm afraid I can't, and I think in the context of what's happening in other parts of the Northeast, and by the way, in other parts of Tees Valley, I just hope that what they're doing at Middlesbrough this weekend doesn't turn into an exercise in hubris which goes dramatically wrong. I mean, I know it's only 1,000 people in a stadium that holds 30,000 or so, but I just hope it doesn't go wrong from that perspective, because, you know, I'm afraid to say, you know, like it or dislike it, or nobody likes it, but I think we are in a serious position here in the northeast of England, and I'm terribly sad about that. I want to go back and watch the two, and I want to sit in the Gallagher end with all the lads I normally see there, but I just can't see it at the moment for quite some time.
No, me neither. And I think it'll hit the non-league hard. We'll see Macclesfield go bust this week. I think there'll be subsequently more clubs that
First
go bust.
First of many, mate.
First of many, yes. I mean, Mitch, it's not great. I mean, I know you're in a different country to us, but you're watching from abroad and seeing the news and seeing what happens in the Chronicle, and it's sad. There's a lot more than football to be taken into consideration with all of this, sadly.
Look, we've said this on here for many weeks now about the post-COVID football world. Some of the moves that I know are being made to try and lessen the impact of this. As a collective, the Football League clubs are losing 25 million a month. That's not sustainable.
No.
Those clubs cannot sustain that. Those clubs and the communities they serve are going to be hit hard. It's not just the club going under. It's the community it serves. It's the jobs that are associated with the football club. It's the impact on the corner shop who rely on the home games to get a bump up in trade week in, week out. It's the impact of the local pubs that rely on the crowds to increase their sales on match day. It's the things some of those clubs still trying to do in their communities that will just go.
Yeah.
The owners have shown with the votes that they made in League One and League Two about how the game should finish last season, have shown they can't work collectively to find a solution. It's all about self-interest. And that's what it's going to become. It's going to become survival of the fittest. And what some of the owners are going to do is milk everything they can out of the club and then just wait for it to sink into administration. And then who are they going to turn to revive these clubs? Well, of course, it's mugs like us.
The fans.
It's the guys at Portsmouth who bailed Portsmouth out, twice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
3 times? It's the guys at Leeds who, thankfully, to see them back in the Premier League, again, how many times were they hit with repercussions? They got hit with a fine that sent them back into administration when they just got back onto their feet for discrepancies made to administrations before that.
Yeah.
And who dug
that's
them
the
out?
disgrace, Mitch.
Yeah, and who dug them out the shit? It was us. It was fans, people like us, and that's who they turned to time and time again.
And
that's what's going to happen.
The football authorities, from my perspective, have just got that totally wrong, because what they do is they hit clubs with fines and points deductions and relegations for misdemeanors of previous administrations. Now, what they should be doing is actually putting in much tighter regulation about how people are running their clubs now, and not then penalising the people who rescue the clubs for what the previous administrations did. That's what happened to Gateshead. I mean, it was absolute disgrace what happened to Gateshead, frankly. And I'll never forgive the National League for that, frankly, like never.
Yeah.
And I genuinely don't think it's going to be just National League and Vanarama League teams. It's going to hit League One. It's going to hit League Two.
Yeah.
And in the next 6 months, because there's absolutely no way. I don't even think that we're going to find fans returning to stadia in any kind of way, shape, or form or volume, certainly this season at all.
Oh.
And let's have this conversation again around Christmas and see how many clubs have gone into administration. It's scary.
Yeah.
Ian, I know you've got. I know you've got.
At the All Party group, we had the chairman of Accrington, Stanley, with us last year, and he talked to us about football finances, about how they'd rescued their club, and about what the current position was within the EFL. And I'm talking about 18 months ago now. But at that stage, the collective debt of EFL clubs was 1.2 billion quid. And that's the collective debt of the 72. And of course, within the Championship, some of them are in bad situations and some of them are in decent situations. But I mean, so you can probably concertina that debt down into 60 from the 72, and it's just not sustainable whatsoever. But the trouble is, the current governance rules of the game and the people in charge of the game have allowed the clubs to do that. Now, that's something rotten in the state of Denmark, from my perspective.
Yeah. And every club, Ian, that seems to be struggling is struggling at its hardest with debt to the inland revenue.
Yeah.
Revenue, man. Yeah. The revenue is the one that comes up. It's the revenue that's put Macclesfield in their place. And I mean, that was the final decision, if you like. Obviously, mismanagement or financial problems, etc., etc. Macclesfield got hammered on the same day. I think I was actually in the same court. I think Southend, they had their case adjourned.
Yeah, they had their reprieve again.
For the 47th time. Mm-hmm. So they were up in front of the beak 46 other times, and they had it adjourned yet again because the owner or the owners or the organisation that run them keep promising that there's money coming, and that particular court on that particular day, or the revenue hasn't stood up far enough and said, yes, okay, we'll take this. And I think again we're talking about sums in the region that are putting these clubs down of maybe £500,000 in terms of an outstanding bill to the revenue. And I know that there was a lot of stick given and a lot of comparisons made in the press during the week about Gareth Bale on nearly £300,000 a week. And at the same time, we've got a football club that's wanting to do that and wanting to spend £300,000 a week on one particular player to come back. At the same time as the owners of that football club and the chief executives are screaming at the Premier League that they want to get fans back in. And the reason they want the fans back in is because they want the fans' money.
Yeah, that's all it is.
That's it. That's all it is. And he reckons he can squeeze 30,000 into his newly constructed football ground that he spent 1.2 or 1.3 billion pounds on. And football's gone crazy. And I listened to I think what is it? The team that United of Manchester that took over, that the fans group.
FC. FC United of Manchester.
That's right. And the lads who were running that were on the radio this morning talking about football finances. And the lad made an interesting point. Obviously, there's something like, in the 8th tier of the league, they've worked their way up from the 10th tier. They're in the 8th tier. And one of their big fears is that they become so successful on the pitch that they'll end up in the Football League. And that could actually destroy them, because at the moment, the whole structure, and they said, we really, really need to look at the success that we have on the football pitch, because it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy that the more successful you become, the more money you need, the more money you have to collect, the more money you have to spend. And then you just need something like COVID to come along again, and the whole rug's pulled from under your feet, and all the good work that they have done. And he said we would have to seriously consider whether we wanted to move up to the next level. And I think they're in the equivalent of the Northern League or something like that, So then they've got to go into the National League North, and then they've got to get into the National League, and then it would be League Two. So, there's still a way for them to go. But I think at that level, there's actually a chance that you can actually refuse to take promotion.
Yeah.
Because finances are not in the right place for you to be able to even afford to travel and spend that money that you need. So it's a conundrum, isn't it? That you get a group of fans who set up a football team from scratch and then could suddenly find themselves in that invidious position of being cracked over the head because they're too successful.
Yeah, dreadful.
Yeah. Great stuff, great point. Ian, I know you've got to go off and play MasterChef for your good ladies. Take care, and thanks for joining us again, mate. And I hope you can get on next week.
It's been a real pleasure, Steve. Thanks very much. Cheers, Neil. Cheers, Steve. Thanks
Cheers, Ian.
Bye-bye.
Ian Mearns, who's the MP for Gateshead. Always great to have him on and get his insight when he joins us on a Friday night. An hour to go. Please hit the like button, which is the little thumb at the bottom. Yeah. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It's free. And if you feel like making a donation to the channel, click join and donate a couple of quid. That would be great.
Steve, have we thought about, we're talking about going back to St. James's Park in some way, shape or form. We talked about Borough there and 1,000 people tomorrow. Well, it's actually 999, isn't it? Because Neil Warnock's now being told that he can't turn up at the ground because he's got COVID. Which, seriously speaking, the guy's 70-year-old, and it could turn into
concern.
And we have to be concerned. But we had a situation, I think, was it Newport last night, where they actually played with 5 players in a UEFA game, played with 5 players who apparently had tested positive. And now they're backtracking and trying to say, oh, hang on, it wasn't like that at all. It was one of the Welsh teams. I'm not sure. It probably wasn't Newport. It was somebody outside of the league, one in the Welsh league or something. And they had this game, played it, and now UEFA are investigating because after the match, their manager came out and said, "Oh, we had to play. We had to shuffle this around. We had to sort of really play on the edge here because and we had players that had tested positive, and we kept it quiet. So they looked all right. They seemed all right. And then this morning he backtracked and said, well, actually, a couple of the players that we brought in, because he had said that they weren't feeling very well, and he said, 3 of them felt sick before the game. 2 of them had to dash off to the toilet. And now, this morning at the press conference, naturally the club's gone, whoa, that's not what he meant. What he meant was they were nervous before the match because they had been drafted in without realising that they were going to be playing. They were just part of the squad, etc. So you've got those type of things going on. But in terms of what is going to be served at a football match, when we get round to actually, let's say we hadn't had this lockdown at the moment, and the plans were still, because apparently they are still in place to try and get us into the ground on the 1st of October. What's it gonna serve? What sort of football? We know the football on the pitch, but what are we gonna get inside St. James's Park? How are we gonna be treated? What are we gonna go through? What's the structure gonna be like? Now, I was at a meeting with the football club on Zoom last week with fan representatives, and the club put the statement out, which was a very interesting statement that they made. But there's a lot of questions there, and we need answers. And I know that people are working through the issues that might have, but I wonder what is it going to be like in the middle of winter going into St James's Park on reduced capacity and on reduced to zero facilities inside that ground to watch a game for 90 minutes. How early am I going to have to get there? What am I going to be served when I'm in there? What's it going to be like going into the toilets? What sort of system are they going to operate? Where am I going to sit? All of those questions are now going to have to be, over the next few weeks, going to have to be thrown open. And these were all questions that we put to the football club, and the football club are now going to come back and answer, hopefully, when and if the Premier League decide, because the government decides, that we can go back into football grounds in one way or another. The lockdown, I think, has probably put the kibosh on Newcastle United in terms of allowing fans in, but who knows, because they may have some sort of scheme in place that allows us to get round of that. I don't know. But we're talking about a ground that normally holds 52,000. You could potentially be looking at, as the statement said, 15,000 max. And depending on configurations, who knows? It could be as low as, I think in the statement said, could be as low as 10. 10,000 in St James's Park. Yes, we've had practice at that, because we've had League Cup games in the past where, the top tier has been shut and there's been barely 25,000 in. But can you imagine St James's Park with 10,000, the atmosphere? Should we be rejoicing that we're going to have some fans back in the ground? Perhaps not. But I'm very much of the opinion that until we know an awful lot more, I don't think any of us can really make a decision on whether we'd want to be back in St James's Park to watch any sort of football, because we need to know that the facility is going to be safe, the environment's going to be safe, and that's safe not just for young people, but for the elderly supporters, the old AP supporters that we have at the ground, that have watched Newcastle United for years and years and years. The fans from the disabled supporters group that have certain special needs that need to be catered for, and they need to be protected as well, but may want to go to St James's Park as well. So,
Steve, are the club still taking the season ticket money? We're having a lot of people saying that they are still taking people's season ticket money. Can you clear that up? Is it because those people are on long-term direct debits? Is it what's the situation there? How do people rectify it?
Already, some people have paid already. Some people have paid up front. Some people on a 10-year scheme, they get the money taken out annually. And now the club is in a situation where they're going to, depending on whether games take place or not, and also depending on whether those who have paid are actually going to get the opportunity to attend, there's going to have to some system for those to have refunds. Some people are paying month to month, and again, that money's coming out of the account, and then those people are now in credit. But at some point, if they don't get into a particular game, there's going to have to be a cut-off point where those fans get a refund for what they've already paid. What if you've paid, for example, for the Platinum Club, and your ticket is £800 a season? And what if you get put into the ground and you get selected in a ballot, and your ticket is that you're allocated, or the seat you're allocated is level 7, where it might have been, a £400 season ticket equivalent? Will you get the equivalent refund? I don't know. These are the sort of questions that fans are going to have to start tinkering around with and asking themselves, and the club is going to have to come up with answers for. And it's going to have to be, the minute they announce that this is how we're going to allow fans back in, and this is how many, and this is how we're going to do it, these are all the issues that are going to suddenly ensue.
It's almost like, Steve, isn't it, that getting some fans back in the ground? To my eyes, the only people that seems to serve is the Premier League.
Yeah.
In terms of showing to their broadcast partners around the world, things are getting back to normal.
Yeah.
The product we're giving you is going to get better very quickly.
Yeah. The more fans we get in, the less money that you'll have to give us, that we'll have to give you back, because there'll be some sort of agreement that's already been made. And I would not be surprised if there was a commitment already given by the Premier League that from the 1st of October, there'll be fans in those grounds, so you don't need to give us refund. You know, we don't need to compensate you as a broadcaster. You know, the league. And now what's going to happen if that 1st of October, and that's why you had Masters on the other night screaming from the high heavens that, you know, we've got to get fans in. How much did he say they were losing? £700 million. That's what he's worried about. He's worried about the £700 million and the impact of that. And yes, Premier League clubs cannot afford, because they're spending £300,000 a week on Gareth Bale and £250,000 a week on X, Y, and Z, and because we've gone out and given contracts to the likes of Fraser and Wilson apparently over £100,000 a week, and you know that's what's been quoted by in the media. So because of that, yes, naturally, there's going to be a huge black hole in the finances. Massive black hole, and they're relying on that being filled by the broadcaster.
Clubs are going bust, and Gareth Bale's getting 250 grand a week.
Yeah.
Shows the extreme discrepancy in football, Steve, and something we've kind of not really talked about fully on here, but we touched on it plenty of times. I've seen somebody talking about regionalisation of leagues, and that's certainly something I know the English Football League is talking about. For League One, League Two, and then introducing teams from the Vanarama into it, and going regional and to reduce travelling, etc., and reduce the costs for those teams, and also giving all teams, including Sunderland, the option to go part-time, because the know going forward, it's not sustainable. It's not sustainable, and when you look at the impact of things like that, regionalisation is not a bad idea, because certainly it's going to help some clubs. You know, everybody talks about when Hartlepool go to Plymouth and Exeter, you know, and the journeys these mad idiots do, usually in fancy dress in Hartlepool's case, you know, and it's fair play to those lads doing it, but how much that costs the teams. You know, I think I've mentioned I know somebody who moved to Truro and he started supporting Truro, and they got this mad construction guy by them with a strange Ukrainian wife, and he pumped loads of money in, and they got something like 6 promotions in 7 seasons, and then they got too big too quick, and one of the leagues had to restructure because teams were forfeiting the games instead of travelling all the way to Truro. And they created a monster for themselves, and it wasn't sustainable. They grew too big too quick, and it all fell apart. The whole thing you were saying with FC United and Manchester's concerns, it's from examples like that is why they look at things like that and go, ooh, hang on, I don't know if we can do this. Yes, getting promoted's a blessing, but the closer you get to the Football League, it becomes a financial curse if you're not careful.
Have you ever seen the farce that occurs in the lower leagues, especially down the south and in the Midlands, when a club suddenly decides that it doesn't want to take up the offer of promotion?
Yes.
Or if a club leaves the league, and the knock-on is that all of those get together and redraw the boundaries for the leagues. So all of a sudden you have a club that is playing in a particular league, and you know, they're traveling 15, 20 miles, 30 miles for their away games, maximum in any direction. And then the boundary gets changed and they suddenly find themselves playing in another league. And that means they're traveling 100 miles. And they've been forced into that because the other 3 teams in their league refused to take promotion. And they were forced to take the promotion. So they take the promotion and suddenly find themselves traveling 100, 150. And before you know it, that club is then financially struggling. So then they drop out. They don't get a chance to drop out and come back to the original league they were in. So you get all of that knock-on effect. And I mean, you've got Gateshead who travel down to the south coast, and they travel to Kent, you know, and places like that to play games. And you think that's absolutely crazy. And we talked, Neil, back in February, we talked about the whole structure of the EFL, and we talked about the someone who was high up in the league with certainly experience of being high in the league. We said to him that it needed to part-time. There needed to be no promotion relegations for a while. The clubs needed stability, but they needed to consider going part-time. And the response we got is, it will never happen because they're all looking after themselves. They would cut each other's throats rather than do something that collectively would help everyone, because the owners all sit there with an ego that thinks that it'll not happen to them, it'll not happen to their club. And you know what?
Keep demonstrating it time and time again. They cannot act in the greater good of the game for everybody. It's about me. And you saw that if you look at the Peterborough owner lives out here in Dubai. He's an interesting character, and you look at his comments on Twitter, particularly after the votes in League One about the playoffs and how many teams should be in the playoffs, etc., and who voted to end the league and who didn't. And that was the perfect demonstration of how everybody just had the knives out.
Yeah,
they were all just prepared to say, "I'm all right, Jack," and sod you.
Yeah, and then what the owners do? The owners turn around and go, "We'll have a cap on salary," and the cap on salary doesn't do them any good either. You know, I mean, the cap on salary is probably going to cripple Sunderland, for example.
It is.
You know, no question.
Well, because of the state of their squad, because of how many players they lost out of contract, and they say they have not been able to replace like with like.
Yeah, no, good stuff, lads, as always. Spenny Mag says, do you think the Premier League are delaying the takeover deliberately so that the rich clubs can buy the players they want, having no competition from us, having rich owners? I mean, the takeover stuff has gone a bit quiet this week. I think we saw the big explosions of, annoyance from Ashley and from the Premier League, and I think a spell of silence is something which we'll see now. But I mean, I don't think the Premier League are delaying it because of that. I think they're delaying it because they've had a flea in their ear from maybe Qatar or BN Sport or whoever, Yeah,
we've got to stop looking for reds under the bed, haven't we? Really,
I think Spenny's come from a position where I threw my hat into the ring last week, and I honestly thought that if the takeover had gone through, when I was envisaged it had, that we'd have gone for Gareth Bale, and I wasn't joking at it. And I made this point to my brother, and my brother went straight online. Jed went online and said, he's 275 to 1. I'll put a tenner on it. So he put a tenner on it. He went back the next day, and Sky Bet had dropped it to 33. So it got from 275 to 33 on the strength of a 10 quid bet. And that's why you just pay no attention to the bookmakers and no attention to the odds that they quote on players. But I thought that I think he's 31 actually. Somebody said they thought Gareth Bale was 33. I think he's 31, and I think he'd be a great. I think he's great. And people say he's always been a fit guy. The problems he's had with hamstrings. Other than seeing him play the odd game for Madrid, my lasting memory of Gareth Bale was seeing him being carried off at St James's Park in the sky blue of Tottenham when his hamstring went over on the far side in front of the East Stand. I think it was a Wednesday night game, and then obviously getting dog's abuse as he was sort of carried and half helped around the ground and down into the tunnel. And I mean, he went down like he had been shot. Literally, you virtually.
Oh, Steve, we're losing you a little bit. Steve, we're losing you a little bit. Your internet's a bit dodgy there. We've had a couple of ins and outs. Maybe worth taking you out and bringing you back in, mate, if you want to rejig something, and I'll have a chat with Mitch and bring you back in. Mitch, you're obviously we're getting lots of questions about the takeover, as we always do. James is asking, if it goes to court, how long does it take for us to get a bloody answer?
That's a very good question. How long is a piece of string? We've been told this kind of legal action can take months. My personal feeling is I don't think it will go to court. I think something will be decided before it gets to court, as many of these things tend to happen. But we just have to wait and see. And it's a horrible thing to sit and say after all the positivity that we've had and all the positive noises we've had over the last few months. It's frustrating to turn around to everybody and say, look, we're all in the same boat here now. We've all just got to wait and see.
Yeah, I mean, it's something which, you know, Josh Blakey says the takeover would have been good for the league in the sense as us being cash rich, we'd have kick-started the transfer window big time. Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard a great deal from either side this week. I think just leave it to the lawyers now and see how long it takes. But I don't expect that to be rushed through.
I think, Steve, I think that's the most interesting thing. I think we haven't really had a proper chat about this week. But like you, the people that were sort of getting their megaphones out and making loud noises out here now are deathly silent, but not deathly silent in a sort of everything's dead sort of way. It's more deathly silent in, I genuinely feel it's like somebody's finally learned a lesson and said, shut up and try and get it done. You know, that's how it feels anyway to me.
Yeah. James May says as Staveley's case against Barkley still ongoing. It is. It's expected to draw to conclusion sometime in October. So I'm sure we'll hear lots about that, whether she wins or whether she loses. Yeah, Steve, you wanted to talk a little bit about the food bank tonight. So let's move on to that. You've got a few updates about them because obviously with no football taking place at St James's Park, the one thing they're missing out on is regular donations from Newcastle United supporters. So tell us what's going on there. How are they coping with the COVID situation?
Yeah, but you know, thankfully they've been coping quite well. I mean, simply because we've had Newcastle United fans who have bent over backwards to help the food bank, and over the last sort of 6 months, I mean, there's been some fantastic donations made. There's been some great schemes put in place by supporters to raise funds for the food bank. Biffer on NUFC.com did some fantastic raffles with donations given by fellow fans, you know, shirts, other types of memorabilia, which was absolutely fantastic. Lads who just donated quietly with no names, just, you know, we've got this in the house, we'll hand it over, see what you can do, because that's the nature of the community that we live in. You know, we have a fantastic football community, but we have some, you know, some really, really caring people out there. And I think we're all in it. We've always said we're all in this together, no matter what it is, whether it's football or whether it's issues that we have with employment, loss of jobs, the COVID situation, whether it's refugees, no matter what, we've always managed to do our bit and help and support the community where it's needed. There's a group of lads have come out and they've produced a set of pin badges which are going on sale tomorrow, and you know, the funds from that are going to go to the food bank, which is fantastic. You can see them on Twitter. You know, I'll be tweeting it out after the show just so that people can see, and of course on the NUFC food bank Twitter site you'll be able to see it. There's another group of lads as a collective nationally are bringing out a football shirt that I think it's $39.99, and it's going to be for sort of, you know, the food bank situation nationally. It's done with the support of most of the food bank football clubs, of food banks associated with football clubs like the lads at Everton, the lads at Liverpool, Sheffield, West Ham, Newcastle, Leeds, Huddersfield, you name it. They're all banding together with that. I actually won a competition by the same group of lads. I just happened to mention on Twitter that you know, there was a competition, and I won a hat. I've got a hat. I can see that.
I saw that you won a beanie.
Isn't what you can win, you know? It's amazing. Absolutely brilliant, you know. Bella Ciao, it says. I'm trying to get it in front of the camera there, but
I can see it there. We can see it. Yeah.
Okay. So I think what I'll do is I think I'll put that into a raffle as well. I'll put that in, put it back in, and try and you know, so that if somebody fancies a woolly hat for the winter, if they are lucky in some of the ballots that are gonna obviously have to take place to see if people can get in the ground. And there's a nice Bella Ciao hat. But that's the sort of things that are happening, you know. As I say, the food bank's been very, very well supported. And they've also had some great donations made by organisations, businesses in the community. Somebody should put the hat on. If I put the hat on, you're not seers, man, you know. But I think what's really good is, I mean, Bill and I have talked, and we said that Bill, Colin, myself, and the rest of the team, if the games do take place, if we do start to get some fans drifting back into St James's, then we will be there on Strawberry Place on match days to collect any donations of food or any cash donations that people want to make. I realise that there's only going to be potentially, between 10 and 15, 17,000 people going to the game, but we will turn up because it's kind of a duty to do so. Whatever we can do. And I think when we had our meeting on Sunday rather, Bill said if we go along and we collect 50 quid, it's 50 quid more than we would have had. So for the sake of standing there for an hour and a half and getting the opportunity to mingle again with fans and have that conversation socially distanced that we used to have with some great friends that we've made over the last 3 years. So we will do that. We're talking about trying to get the license extended and maybe getting a pitch somewhere else in town. Maybe some of the pubs might be able to also do some collecting, and then we could pick the stuff up later on. But we don't know. But there's lots of ideas being flown around. But the main thing is it's still going to happen. We're still out there, and fans are still contributing. And you can go onto the website, or you can go onto the Twitter site, and you can put in the number, the text number, and you can donate. And again, I'll tweet that out after the show tonight so people can see it. And if they do want to make a donation, however small, they know that it's going to be gratefully received and will go to a fantastic cause.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic work that the guys do, Mitch. And I know you're a big supporter, even across in Dubai.
But it's interesting, something people probably don't realise is the global impact of things like doing the food bank has for the reputation of Newcastle United, and Newcastle as a city and community. Chris McCarty, who's the head of sport here in Dubai, I loved it so much. He was getting Steve's details off me to reach out and have a chat, because it was something he wanted to introduce onto one of the shows out here. And particularly with the interest in the region and the club, it's the kind of thing that makes the city shine. That community spirit, that togetherness, but also particularly in this region, that charity is one of the pillars of Islam, and so giving to charity, zakat, every year is something that is deep to the community here too. So for them to see that as a city, we sort of have similar beliefs at the heart of our community and what we do. And that we want to look after people and we want to look after each other. And we do it because it's the right thing to do, not because we've got to do it. And that makes our city stand out, and it makes our community stand out. And that's why when I, wear this shirt out here and talking about pin badges, I've always got a pin badge in, either in my shirt collar or in my waistcoat if I'm suited and booted. But it's always there because I'll always represent. And it gets noticed. It gets noticed. Yeah. And it's amazing. And it makes me feel proud to say, actually, I know the guys who did that. They're good friends of mine.
Yeah.
And to then start a conversation on that, it's amazing.
We just facilitated it. We just had the idea, and it's been taken on. Absolutely, 110% by the supporters in Newcastle United. And so without those supporters, it wouldn't be what it is now.
But Steve, without you, Bill and Colin actually doing, it's all very well and good to talk about it. Far too many people talk, not too many people walk. Yeah, and you guys did it, and that's what you need the praise for, mate.
I go to St James's Park as every home game, and see is there, guys, and you Colin, have been there from the beginning. It hurt me a little bit. I think maybe it's more than it hurt you when I heard other people trying to create a false narrative to say that they had actually been there from the start. And I'm not going to name names, but hang their heads in shame, those people who tried to take the credit for it. And ultimately, we all know who did it and why. But I know you're not that kind of person, Steve, for wanting the praise, but you do deserve it. And I'm glad to hear that things are still going on, and we'll support it as long as we can as well. Let's do the last half hour. There's plenty of questions coming in, guys, and keep them coming in. We like these kind of questions. Michael Hurst said, Hi guys, how are you all? Who do you think the first manager to be sacked in the Premier League this season will be? So we'll open that up to everybody watching. We'll give our opinions as well. Michael thinks David Moyes. I've got to be honest, Michael, that would be my shout. Last year, as you know, I would have said Steve Bruce. This year, I think you're right. So I am going to go with David Moyes as well. Steve,
No, Neil, you go first. Go on.
That's actually really hard to disagree with, particularly because we know it's a club in turmoil. We know it's a club that's got the captain making statements about the squad and the board on Twitter. The fans are starting to, stamp their feet and get a bit aggressive. And from what we saw of them at the weekend, that's not a happy ship at all.
No, Steve, go on then.
I thought, you know what, it will give us an opportunity to have a think and come up with somebody. To be perfectly honest, I couldn't think of anyone else. I think there's some interesting names coming up. Bilic is probably under pressure, yes. Smith's under pressure, but the guys at the very top are probably under pressure. And
dark horse is Mourinho, because he's lost the plot at Spurs again. He's lost the dressing room.
Yes, but Mourinho thrives on that, doesn't he? Do you think Lampard's under pressure? Do you think with the amount of money he's spent, do you think that's been spent with you know what? If we don't get off to a good start, if we don't get some decent results early doors, and there's a little bit of a gap opening up, would Abramovich pull the plug on him? I don't know.
It's an end of season. It's an end of season job if he goes. Plus, he's a club legend.
Yeah.
So, unless it was a disastrous run which saw them, battling relegation, I think the shouts have been made there. Stop Parker, because he took them down before. Didn't he? Took them down last time. He's got to be on the list. I think Solskjaer, Man United can pull the trigger at dodgy times, but I think they'll do okay. Dean, the Aston Villa manager, is a good shout.
Yeah.
But I think
because they've spent money on players that aren't proven, and that's often not a good combination.
Do you think there's any managers out there that would walk then? Do you think there's any
Mourinho? And Bale's a panic. I saw Bizwidget put a message up early doors when Ian was on, saying Bale's a panic buy, and it is because he's not. It's not. You're not buying Bale who went to Real Madrid. You're buying someone. You're buying somebody who's got a bad injury record out there, and I don't know. He's got a lot of money for and what's his character like? And he's coming back into a problem. He's coming back into some kind of problem there. Maybe it's Dele Alli. Maybe he's the one who's the apple in that. Is that
a Mourinho buy or is that a club buy for him?
Club buy for him, I think. I don't think
exactly.
I don't think Mourinho's picked him as a one to bring in. Yeah, it's a strange one. Great question because it does get everybody talking. Pep could walk as well. I love this one. Simon Davis says Pep after Bruce wins the league.
There's a name though. Is Bruce under pressure?
Well, Nathan says hardly anybody's mentioning Bruce because we've won 2 out of 2. Bruce would have been my pick last year, as I said. But I don't think he's pressed. I don't think his place is under threat this year.
While a manager's winning, he's not under pressure. When a manager starts to lose and he looks like he can't find a way to win, which is the Bruce that finished last season, that's a different manager.
Yeah.
So I think I think Bruce is game by game really at the minute, and that's why we're not talking about it, because we did look good against West Ham. We played well, and we've won. Like we said at the start of the show, we scrambled through the League Cup, but that's all you need to do. We won 2 out of 2, and everything's okay. Nobody's getting excited about, overexcited and demanding all sorts of shit like people will still say that we are. But everything's sort of okay. And okay is probably about as good as we can hope for. And that's fine. Whereas it's not okay at Tottenham. I noticed they had fans with banners out about getting rid of Enoch. I mean, how long ago were we in a Champions League final, lads? Dear me, and we're the deluded and over-expected ones? Jesus.
Didn't Mourinho make a press conference today where he was asked a question about I think it was after last night's game where he was questioned quite heavily about the performance and about the lack of possession and the fact that they seemed to be not necessarily under the cosh, but they certainly weren't holding the ball up. They weren't performing very well. And Mourinho's answer was, "We won." You know, how many goals did they score? And you could hear the tension in his voice. And he came back and he absolutely rattled the reporter, and the reporter tried to rattle him back. And it was quite interesting that Mourinho wanted to get into that argument with the reporter. And yes, perhaps he is under pressure. I mean, with that Netflix program where you're seeing him, that I thought that was fascinating when we saw him with Danny Rose.
Oh, the Amazon program, the Amazon Prime program.
Where Danny Rose went in and tried to explain why he thought he should be in the squad, and he was explaining, well, you know, but did we lose? Did he play? You know, you played very, very well, but did we lose in the following game when I didn't play you, when I rested you, and the whole and the attitude. And I noticed now Rose hasn't even been given a number, has he, at Tottenham? And his days are numbered, and he's supposed to be going out on loan, or he's been signed up for another club.
Genoa, I think, mate.
Yeah, and so Mourinho might be a good shout. That might be a very, very good shout. Somebody mentioned there about Everton. Now, I personally think Everton have made the buy of the season so far. I think James Rodriguez is an absolutely superb footballer, and I think he could be the gem that moves Everton forward into a top 6, top 7 challenging team, because he's gifted as anything, and I think he's got the strength and the heart and the fight within him to actually put performances in, and he's a very, very intelligent player. So I can't see Ancelotti being one of those that would get the push, because you notice that James went to Madrid, and I think Ancelotti was manager. He went to Munich when Ancelotti was manager. Now he's at Everton under Ancelotti again. So Ancelotti obviously sees something in him. So I think Everton could be dark horses. And I know there's Newcastle fans will be like screaming at the screen now when I say it, because, you know, they're not the most popular of football clubs when it comes to Newcastle fans. But that there could be someone who could potentially, with a signing like that, and maybe with one or two others in their defence, to actually shake up the Premier League this season, you know, because of that one particular catalyst that sometimes they can raise the game of those players around them, you know. So it's going to be interesting.
20 minutes left. Questions flying in. We'll not get through them all because we're only doing 20 more minutes. We're finishing at 8 o'clock. Captain Clifford asks, lots of midfielders now at Newcastle. Who would be your choice? We've only seen 2 games. Obviously, we've seen the A team and the B team. Mitch, you know, what would be your ideal choice in that midfield, across the midfield?
Right now, the 3 who started against West Ham have no reason to be dropped for me. I think they turned out 3 good performances. Hendrick did a lot of work quietly and picked up an assist and a goal. Hayden, with his new contract, actually looked a better player. He looked really up for it. And you know, everybody talks about Rice, but I mean, he's probably still picking bits of Rice out of his back pocket. You know, he had him totally wrapped up. And Shelvey frustrates the bloody living daylights out of me, because on his day he can be the best player in the world, and you have to almost accept that he turns into Forrest Gump's box of chocolates, and you don't know what you're going to get. But one day you're going to get somebody who can play the Hollywood ball, absolutely boss a game, score a goal, make a goal, and be the difference maker. And another day he'll just disappear with his own backside. And those are the days where you've then got to look at the bench and say, right, who can we bring in to mix this up? And the one I would be pushing forward to get him into that more advanced role would be Sean Longstaff. He needs to find a home He needs to find a role. He needs to find a definition to find himself again.
Mm-hmm.
And is it in a deeper role in that midfield three, or is it pushed forward in the three behind the strikers? You know, it's difficult to know what to do with him, but he needs to be given a role defined as his own. But it should be him, you know, knowing what he can do and at the stage of his career. But you're right. I mean, it's a nice, isn't it? A nice problem to actually think, ooh, who could we pick if going to our midfield? Not thinking, oh God, and he's shit and he's crap and this one's rubbish. So it's a better discussion to have, I guess.
Of course it is. Steve, what's your take on it?
You know what? As good as we were on Saturday, we could be having this conversation next Friday, absolutely slagging off our midfield.
Yes.
That's the problem that we've got, because we have an absolute stinker. Because, you know, you're talking about the Hollywood pass. He probably couldn't even find the Hollywood bowl, you know, in other games. So the big question for me, because I'm still not sure what Bruce is doing with the formation. I know everybody went, oh, we played 4-4-2. I thought we narrowed it and we played a three midfield. And I
would agree with.
I thought that Shelvey and Hendricks came in, and that allowed the fullbacks to go on, which meant that I thought San Maximin was playing a more central behind, like in a diamond, but he then started pulling off to the left all the time, and it was Wilson that was peeling off to the right and allowing Carroll to actually sort of play as a kind of deeper centre forward. You know, he wasn't up there giving their back to grief constantly. And I think if anything, what we saw was that when he did try that, he didn't have that extra yard that was needed when he got into the box to actually make a difference when the crosses were coming in. He was always behind the ball and not quite making it. And I'm wondering whether we'll adapt and whether we'll suddenly start to use the Sean Longstaff in a deeper line sort of striker role come number 10 role and allow people to play around it, because we saw that last season that he can play that role. I think everybody thought that his original position was going to be more of a deep lying midfielder in the Hayden mold, and we saw him playing alongside Hayden rather than as a sort of in front of him when he was replacing Shelvey when he was injured. I mean, there are going to be injuries. We know that players are going to be injured. We know we're going to have issues during the season, and formations are going to have to change, and that personnel will change. I'm worried that there isn't a position for Sean. That's my worry. I wonder whether we've got Matty there to replace Hayden if he's injured, or whether Matty needs to go out on loan. I'm wondering where Fraser's going to fit in when we've already got Almiron and we've got San Maximin and we've still got two strikers. Will he push either? If he takes Carroll out of the equation for a couple of games because of fitness or whatever, or because of injury, which of the three will come in? Which of that three would come in and be replacement? You don't take Fraser on a 4 or 5 year contract and chase him for as long as you did without there actually being a place for him in that midfield as well. So are we suddenly going to go to a tighter four and the likes of San Maximum or Almiron playing in that whole area and Wilson playing? It's like you say, it's a good problem to have. And that's the nature of having a squad, isn't it? You know, but we saw on the cup game the depth of our squad, and the quality.
Yeah,
you may have the numbers, but the quality and that ability to blend in and to produce a top class performance, no matter who your personnel is. Or when I say top class, I mean a competitive performance. That's all Newcastle fans are looking for. They're looking for the performances to always be competitive. And whoever comes in has got to compete. And I suppose you look at Saturday and you think, well, like you said, Neil, you're holding the shirt, so the shirt's yours, and it's now for you to keep that performance going. And if you come off because you're not performing, and somebody comes on and scores, or someone comes on and makes a difference to a game, then you're out. you know, and you're on the bench now. You're gonna have to wait your turn. So
yeah, David Crunch pointed out what I said the other day, which is horses for courses. You know, he's got a multitude of options. You know, and he can play different formations. And I agree to an extent what Chris Collins said, where essentially he just said, you know, it depends on Carroll's fitness. If Carroll's fit, then, you know, Bruce seems to like to play him, and we get the best out of Andy Carroll, and you can play different midfielders. But I want to move on to the next question before we start looking ahead to tomorrow, to Sunday's game against Brighton. Somebody asked best away grounds and worst away grounds. That's getting quite a bit of traction amongst people. Paul Shanks says Plough Lane was one of the worst by miles. Best away day, Craven Cottage for Chris. Worst was Bournemouth. Now maybe St Mary's. For me, my answer on that would be best away ground Anfield for the atmosphere, and best away ground for an away support. I used to be Highbury. I loved Highbury, especially when it was seated in the away end, because you had £12, I think it was, to go to an away game in Highbury, but there was plenty knee room, and for somebody who's 6'2", you know, it was quite a comfortable away ground to go and sit and have a cup of coffee before the match started. Or you know, it just, those are the kind of things you remember. Away games, Millwall, the old ground, Coldblow Lane, absolutely awful. I saw Tom Lynch mention Leicester. I wasn't so bothered about that. I hated Barnsley because the away coaches used to get stopped outside the ground, used to get there in record time, and then they used to hold you like in the middle of a country lane, and you would be looking across at the ground going, well, it's just there. And they would keep you and keep you and keep you there. And then when they eventually got you there, you'd have your best trainers on, and you would end up parking on that muddy bank, and you'd get out and you'd be in the clots walking across to and you're going down this huge bank. So I hated Barnsley. And I think Grimsby, because you had to go through the housing estate. And you literally, this was after Hillsborough. I remember going to Grimsby going, what the hell? You're going down people's back alleys. They're putting bins out, and you know what I mean. There's people having people stopped, you know, cleaning the back of their house and that, and you're going, gee, this isn't the way to the ground, is it? But it was. But yeah, that's mine anyway. Mitch, you must have a couple of favourites and a couple of worsts.
Favourite place I used to love to go was Bristol. Not just for the not for the ground per se, but for the city. It was always a good weekend. It was always a good trip. Me and Jamie used to often, when EasyJet started the flights, we used to fly down there and have a great weekend down Bristol. And we used to go there when we played Cardiff as well, and then get the train into Cardiff. And if it fell right, you'd catch a game in Bristol on the Saturday and our game in Cardiff on the Sunday. And it was always a good weekend away. Blackburn as well. What the thing they used to do with the pub near the Darwin end, where they used to have all this bottle bars and the food places in the car park outside, and it created a really good atmosphere for the away fans. Also the scene of one of the funniest things I've ever seen in an away game. Which is a story for another day, probably. So yeah, we always had good trips to Blackburn. I was going to say Oakwell straight away. Barnsley is a horrible place to go, because of exactly the reason you said. He used to be held. And also, I seem to remember a couple of times going to West Brom and having something similar done, where they'd take you on like a grand tour of various back streets in the Black Country, just to make the journey longer, to keep you sort of on the coach and not out of the coach and in the pub. And then you'd get off and you'd be knackered and you'd be wanting to drink, and then none of the pubs near the ground let away fans in. So you've then got to hike about 2 miles to find a pub that'll let you in. And then you've just got to lamp as much down your neck as you can before you then got to lamp all the way back to the bloody ground. And it just seemed to be thought through to make things as difficult as possible for an away fan to do anything other than get off the coach and go straight into the ground. And yeah, I've got a couple of interesting memories from Leicester, from the old Filbert Street.
I tell you what, we'll do. tell you what we'll do, because obviously we'll run out of time tonight, but I've often thought about doing some stuff just on retro games, and I think maybe we could have a chat about that. We'll have a chat off air, and I think we can maybe knock up a little mini show, I think, and do stuff about that. And I think there's plenty of fans would like to talk about games, etc., and grounds, but I think let's do that. So, Steve, your best and worst away grounds.
I enjoyed Highbury. I thought it was great. I thought because of the history. Main road for a different reason, but then it's spoilt by the taxi driver who you get the taxi in from town centre and you say, take us to Main Road, and he drops you off at the wrong end, and there's 5 of you, and there's like 500 of them, and you suddenly realise that you're going to have to walk through this like sort of mob. That was a bit awkward. And then when you come out, and then they used to put you on those buses and take you to town centre, and they were all waiting for you there. That was awkward. QPR. Not your favourite ground, Steve, QPR. I know that.
No.
But,
is it a bird? Is it a plane?
Yeah, that's another one of those grounds, though, isn't it? Another one of those still an oldie worldy ground, with a character of whether you could call it character building or whatever, but they're still all falling to bits, wooden place. But you got some great noise generated, except when we're 3-0 down, and Les Ferdinand was tearing you another one. I used to. Bramall Lane was a strange place. Hillsborough was a strange place. But I agree with Neil. Blackburn, as long as it wasn't Roy Wegley that was putting the ball in the back of the net, you enjoyed yourself. You know what I mean? And you're standing there and you suddenly realise that there was like a crowd of lads got off a bus and were standing next to you from Walker, and you realise that half of them were like our reserve team, Rochi and people like that who had suddenly appeared because they'd come down, and all, an absolutely fantastic atmosphere that was created by the lads from Walker, brilliant times, great laugh. But Highbury for me has this character about it that walk up, and when you try to get into that Highbury pub and you realise you're not going to get into that bar at the top end, and then you have to walk all the way around, and it, just the clock stand and just being part of something, you always felt as though you're part of history.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's something which you look back on. It's when you start going back on those like memory trips and you start talking about your own personal recollections, and then having a live audience. I think it's a great idea. We'll definitely do it. There seems to be plenty of support for a retro show. We'll have a think, and we'll if it's another live show, we'll do it, because I know everybody's always keen to like chip in. We'll maybe do it alphabetically. Maybe that's the way to do it. Start with A and move on. But yeah, great stuff. Let's look ahead. Let's have a look ahead to Brighton then. Brighton, from our point of view, is a team which we've obviously been neck and neck with in recent years, because we were chasing them for promotion. We pipped them on the final day after they went out for a few drinks for a few days after thinking they'd clinched the title. Since then there haven't been humdingers. There haven't been great games. We've done them at their place. They've done us at our place. Steve, your take on that game first and foremost. First of all, team-wise, do you think he's going to go unchanged from the West Ham game? And give us a prediction.
Yeah, I think you will go unchanged. I'm looking forward to the game in so much as seeing a little bit more of the new signings, seeing a little bit more Jamal Lewis, who I thought had a great game. Yeah. He reminded me, and I said that in midweek, he reminded us of Trent Alexander-Arnold in the way that he was wanting to bomb on, but he had this defensive capability about him. And I thought in the first half he was superb attacking-wise, and in the second half superb defensively. And I felt as though that game, everything had to come down the camera side, if you like, in front of the dugouts, and it was great. I thought we played performance-wise. I thought we played very well, and I'm hoping that we can carry on in the same mould. I can see us winning 2-0. I can see us, picking up the 3 points, and I'm putting my hat on a 2-0 win. Okay,
Mitch, same question to you, mate.
I think it'll be a little tighter than that. I think Brighton play good football under Potter. He sets them up well. They certainly played better than the result against Chelsea suggested. And they'll certainly be a tougher task than West Ham as well. But I do think we'll come out by the odd goal out and see we're winning 2-1. with deference to my good friend Stuart, who always puts on 3-1, no matter what the game. He'll have his 3-1 on again tomorrow, on Sunday rather. But no, I think we should have enough based on the performance against West Ham to take the 3 points. But I think it'll be by the odd goal, 2-1.
Himanshu gives us a stat and a half there. We've scored 1 goal against Brighton since promotion, none at home. Yeah, I'm going to go for a tight game then. Thanks for that, Himanshu. I think we'll win 1-0. I think we'll keep the run going. I've got a good feeling about it. I think Wilson's going to do a Mickey Quinn. He's going to go on a little bit of a run at the start of the season. He might get 5 or 6 goals in his opening games. I've got a good feeling. I think Wilson will get the goal to count. Be good to get 3 clean sheets. And I think the stats being, if he can win tomorrow, I think it's the first time we'll have had back-to-back wins at the start of the season since 98-99, which is a hell of a long time. So, but George McVeigh, he says, I'll take a point. They're a good team, and Brighton are a good team. I think they give a good account of themselves in their opening games, and it will be a tough game. Keith Rose says, great show as always, a great way to start the weekend. We're getting plenty of those. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys
for all your comments. Very tough game. We need to press them as much as they will us. Another cracking show tonight, lads. See you next week. 2-1 to the lads on Sunday. Steve Bennett, thanks guys. Highlight of the week, great crack. Sam Robson, hopefully we don't sit back and we press them. Byrony, thanks for tuning in as always. Brilliant show once again, lads. It brightens up these Friday nights, especially with the new restrictions. Great show, lads. Plenty of these. Honestly, it's really nice for your support. And I know I've seen other people attempting to do shows very similar to ours, and we appreciate your loyalty. We appreciate you sticking with us. And, I'm just glad that you enjoy listening to three mates and an MP talking about football on a Friday night, whilst they're supping beer and I'm supping water still. But yeah, it's a good week, lads. It's a positive week. Not too much to say on the takeover, and let's just hope we get the result this weekend. I think we're all just enjoying Newcastle a little bit more than we maybe did last season, aren't we?
Enjoying a bit of positivity, enjoying football again, and having some decent football things to talk about as well. Yeah. And I think that's the difference is that general vibes a little bit more positive, just because we're talking about more positive things.
I enjoy not being accused of criticising Steve Bruce, actually, to be perfectly honest. Because there's a lot of people thought they're very, very anti-Bruce. We weren't anti-Bruce. We just want the best for our football club, and felt as though we weren't seeing the best and didn't see any improvement at the back end of last season, and were disappointment. So we're going to take our disappointment out on that particular area,
It's fair to say we will always call it as we see it. Yeah. We'll criticise where it's due, but we'll give praise where it's due as well, and that's what it should be. We should be able to be the critical friends of the clubs and the players and everybody there. Because we care as much as they should care. And if you've got someone who can pull you to one side and say, oi, nah, but for the right reason, for the right reason, not just to chuck stones just for the hell of it, just because we, want to have a go at someone.
Exactly. We don't have a pop at Bruce just because we're like Rafa. We didn't have a pop at other managers just because we're like the previous manager. We're happy with some of the stuff that Pardew did when he got with the 5th, but we're very disappointed some of the stuff that Pardew produced when he went on the most disastrous of runs. Exactly the same with McLaren. That's the nature of football, and the nature of football is that you watch what you see it in front of you, and you criticise it where it's deserved. You
remember that game? You remember that game where Pardew had something like 6 fullbacks in the team?
Yes.
And everybody's looking at that team sheet going, what the absolute hell? And the only person that couldn't see it seemed to be him.
Yeah. You're right. I think the best thing about these shows, lads, apart from your crack, is, of course, John Owen from Jab, who does a cracking job with the posters. And I think he's done an absolute belter this week. Just before we finish, somebody said I looked Arabic. They said,
shway.
Yeah, I can't remember what they said about you, Neil. But they says, and as for Steve Hasty as Hermione, dear me, how.
That's going to give. That's going to
be that long, I tell you. Back in the day.
You look a bit like Angus Young from AC/DC there.
Yes, for that, Steve.
I'm not sure. I can't really see the Arabic in me. Like maybe he's, I don't know. Maybe he's a bit of Imran Khan, the cricketer. Maybe he's there. And I think I've got it. Mitch looks a bit like he looks a bit like the one of the guys out of Scum, Palomine, Perry Benson. He's an actor. Yeah.
That's, you know what I mean? That's me never going in a greenhouse again. Jesus.
You're checking what's inside your sock anyway.
Make sure it says
you'll never be allowed to buy batteries again.
Make sure it says Steve looks like Keith Chegwin. Barry BTS says Mitch looks like Harry.
Like bloody Eric Gates, isn't it? You know.
Mitch looks like Harry Potter. Mitch looks like Austin Powers. That's it, Austin Powers. Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. Fantastic. Final.
No, they are brilliant.
They are. Lee Taylor says, cheers, lads, for another cracking show. Hopefully this time next week we'll be talking about 4 wins instead of 2. Oh, they're coming in now. Mitch looks like Harry Potter. Steve H looks like Ron. But Gandalf. Great stuff. Well, listen, lads, have a good night, and I will speak to you very, very soon. Thanks for everybody for tuning in, and I'm back tomorrow. I'm doing 2 shows tomorrow, 11 o'clock in the morning, something a little bit different. I've got my pal Gary Webster on, who great actor. He was the man who replaced. He was the man who became George Cole's second minder. Yes, as you remember, he's coming on to boast about Aubameyang signing a new contract and about football in general and a little bit about acting, George Cole and those days on minder. And then we're doing the worldwide show tomorrow. That will be at 2 o'clock, 2 till 2:45, because I'm going to go off and watch Dunster, which could be the last match that I ever see till lockdown finishes again. And then we'll be back for Match Day Live on Sunday. So I'll send you the link, lads, and if you get a chance to dip in, Mitch from the pub, Steve.
Yeah, I mean, you get up at 10 o'clock and the first thing you do is put ITV4 on and watch Minder, followed by the Sweeney, followed by the Professionals. And I think I'm now on to like the 3rd repeat of them all. You know, that's how long lockdown's been on.
Exactly. Well, it should be good anyway. I'm looking forward to it. But anyway, lads, thanks again. Take care and good night. And good night, everybody watching. Cheers.
Cheers, everyone.
Okay.